All right, again, so far we have been dealing with point particles. We've been assuming even if we had bodies with finite size, we have been assuming that they are just a point particle. But a point particle means that it has a mass but no size. Okay? And this approximation works really well if we have a situation where an object moves in such a way that every particle on that object has a similar motion. Let's say if this was moving in a straight line, if this object was moving, every object executes the same motion, and this assumption works really well. However, realistic systems do not execute simplistic motion. I mean, the real systems have more complicated motion. For example, if I throw up this duster, you see that it's not going up and down, just it is rotating, it is moving. You see this duster is rotating, and that is the type of motion. In this case, it's rotation. In addition to translation, that the object is not only going up and down, but it's also rotating, or oscillation. When parts of the object are oscillating with respect or moving back and forth, when these additional movements come into play, then this approximation of a point particle, assuming an object as a point particle, does not really work. And we need to come up with a formalism which additionally describes the motion of the parts of the object as well. And we will do that in the next chapter. But today we are going to learn another simplification when we have more realistic systems. So more realistic systems means that we no more have one particle, but we have a system of particles. Okay? How do we describe the motion of a system of particles? All right. So here again, if you carefully look in slow motion of the way this duster is going up and down, and you try to trace its motion on a graph, this is what you would see. And you can take any object which has an elongated structure. You could think of a dumbbell, you could think of a baton, you can think of any number of objects. You can even take this chalk, for example, is not very visible. So the chalk, and if you throw it up, so it has both motions. It rotates and it goes forward, it moves, it translates. And let's take a simplified object, a rigid simplified object, which is a mass attached to one end, let's say M1, and another mass attached to the other end through a rigid rod, okay? M2. Now, if you throw this object like we did with the projectile, so what you would see is that these two masses trace a trajectory, something that looks like this. One of the mass would trace a trajectory that looks like this. The other mass would trace a trajectory that looks like this. And then you can think of any intermediate points on this object. For example, this object, this point, this point, this point, and they would have very complicated, this not very regular, ugly looking paths. Okay. But if you carefully look the motion of such an object, whether in this graph or you do an experiment at home with such an extended object, you will see that there is one special point. Okay, there is one special point on this object, somewhere on this object, which executes a very nice parabolic motion that we expect from a projectile. So if we could work with that point, we would still be able to simplify such a motion in a very convenient way. Okay, so today's lesson is about that special point. Okay, some of you probably already know its name, but let's look at it once more if you already know this concept, and hopefully in a little bit more detail than you know it before. Now, let's say that, of course, we are going to generalize it to many particles, but let's say now we have this simple system. Okay? One mass, M1, M2, attached to each other through a rod of mass Mr. Okay? And we throw them like this space. And we try to analyze their motion. One more thing, before we start analyzing the motion of this object, now it's very important to make this assumption or make this point very clear. I think we may have mentioned this before, that when we had one particle, it was much simpler situation. We just separated the particle from its environment and looked at the interactions that it was having with its environment, and those were our forces acting on this object. All right. In this case, now we no more have the luxury of having a simple particle. We have a system of particles. In this case, we have three objects, let's say, mass 1, mass 2, and the rod. Okay, so in this case, we have to look at this whole thing, and this is the boundary. Okay, now this is our system. And whatever forces, now if you look at the forces that are acting on this system, there are two types of forces. One is the gravity acting on this object, the whole object. But now if you see it's a rigid object, this mass M1 is pulling on the rod in this direction. The rod in response is pulling on the mass M1. The rod is pulling on M2, and M2 is pulling on the rod with equal and opposite force. Okay? So there are two types of forces. Okay? The forces which are coming from the environment outside the system are called external forces. And the forces that live inside the system, the boundary of the system, are called internal forces. We did not have the question of internal forces when we were dealing with point objects. But now we are dealing with system of particles, an object made of system of particles, more realistic objects. In that case, we have internal forces and we have external forces, and we must deal with all of them. Right? So now we try to study the motion of this object, taking into account all the forces that are acting on this object. So I could just erase this and use this space here. So let's consider M1. The particle with mass M1. Okay. What are the forces that are acting on it? Can you help me? There is a force that rod exerts on this M1 in this direction. Okay. The rigid rod exerts on M1, and we call this force F1R. Okay. It's the rod exerting on particle 1. And then there is this force of gravity, which is an external force, and it's being exerted on particle 1. So that would be the second force, and we write it 1E. That means external force acting on the particle 1. That would be, there is no other force if you see, external or internal, only two forces acting on this particle. It's the external force, the weight that's coming due to the pull of the earth on this mass, and the rod that is exerting a force on M1 equals.
सर इसमें से एक फोर्स नेगेटिव नहीं होनी चाहिए, क्योंकि जो मतलब जो वेट एक्सर्ट कर रहा है रॉड पे फोर्स, वो तो आपकी पॉजिटिव हो जाएगी, तो जो रॉड एक्सर्ट करी है उस पे मास पे, वो तो नेगेटिव नहीं होनी चाहिए कि इट्स गोइंग टुवर्ड्स द लेफ्ट.
Yes, we'll come to that. But so far, I'm just writing general vectors. We're not specifying their directions. We're not specifying. So it's just a force that is acting on mass M1 from the rod. Okay, forget about signs for now. We'll bring the signs back. Okay. For the time being, it's just a vector, the force acting on this object. Okay, we haven't really specified a coordinate system just yet, right? So just two forces. And the right side, I could write M1 dr1 over dt. You're all right with this, huh? Second derivative of the position vector is nothing but the acceleration of that object. Very similarly, I can write the forces acting on M2 as well. One force is the rod exerting on object 2, F2R, and the external force, 2E, the gravity that is acting on the, okay, and this would be M2 d squared R2 over dt squared, right? Now we need to write all the forces for the rod, okay? And the rod has object 1 pulling on the rod, R1. This is F1R, this is FR1. Plus the object 2 pulling on the rod, R2, plus the external force, RE, the external force on the rod. And that would be mass of the rod times the acceleration of the rod. All right. So these are three equations for each of the particle. But we are interested in the net motion of the particle. We need to simplify this description. All right. And in order to simplify that, and before I do that, here is a little comment. Somebody already pointed out that the force that rod exerts on M1 is equal and opposite to the force that the mass M1 exerts on the rod. But there is a very big caution here. When is this action reaction true? When is this action reaction equal? One is that we have when so one of the important points here is that we are in the inertial frame. We're trying to apply Newton's second law. We need to be in the inertial frames. Otherwise, these equations would not make any sense. And the second thing is that this is a rigid object. If it is not a rigid object, and if the one object is moving away from the other object, then their action reaction pair is probably not equal. Okay, so this is only true for the rigid objects, that F1R is equal to minus FR1. Okay. Now let's add all these three equations. Okay, add all these three equations, and what we would get is something like this: F1R plus F1E plus F2R plus F2E plus F R1 plus F R2 plus F RE equals M1 R1 dt squared M2 R2 over dt squared plus M3 RR over dt squared. This is MR actually, not M3. All right. So this equation we get. Now, if we invoke this action reaction pair equality, okay, both for F1R and R1 and F2R and R2, because it's a rigid object given. So this all analysis only applies to rigid objects. If the object was deforming, then we wouldn't be able to take this. All right. And in this case, F1R would cancel with F1R here, sorry, FR1, and F2R would cancel with FR2. And the equation becomes a little bit simpler.
सर ये कैंसिल कैसे होंगे, ये प्लस नहीं हो रहे?
ये 1R है, ये इक्वल टू है -R1 के, इंडेक्स चेंज हो रहा है नीचे.
अच्छा अच्छा सही है, समझ आ, थैंक यू सर.
ये देखे ना यहाँ पे 1R is equal to -R1. Okay, so we have F1E F2E plus FRE. Very nice, no? Because on the left-hand side, all we are left with is external forces. All the internal forces have canceled out. And this is only possible if you have a rigid object. Okay. And on the right side, we have all these three terms. Okay, I'm not going to write them again. This thing same here. Okay. Now on the next page, next board, I'm going to write. Any questions so far?
सर जो रिजिड ऑब्जेक्ट की क्या एक डेफिनेशन होगी वैसे?
यही रिजिड ऑब्जेक्ट की डेफिनेशन है कि एक रिजिड ऑब्जेक्ट पे एक पार्टिकल जो है ना, किसी दूसरी पार्टिकल पे जितनी फोर्स लगाता है ना, वो उतनी ही फोर्स दूसरा पार्टिकल उस पे लगाता है, एंड दे डू नॉट मूव रिलेटिव टू ईच अदर, ऑल पार्टिकल्स इन पेयर्स.
जी ठीक है, थैंक यू सर.
Now these, let's see this. This is just a sum of all the external forces acting on three different particles. Okay, I can just write them as a single external force. Okay, so sum of the three external forces is an external force. So I can just simply write that I have a force Fe acting on my system. However, on the right-hand side, I have these three terms I have to deal with. R1 dt squared plus M2 R2 dt squared plus MR d squared RR over dt squared. Okay, so let me define a quantity, capital M, which is nothing but the sum of all the masses involved, M2 MR. Okay, and now divide this side of the equation, multiply and divide with that number M. Okay, so this becomes M. And one more thing, I want to make a jump here. See this. If I have something like this, where M is a constant and R is a variable R, okay, position vector R. So if I take its derivative with respect to time, what would I get? M times dr over dt, right? Because M is constant. So constant simply comes out, right? Then if I take another derivative of this, then I would simply get a double derivative of r with respect to t. M just comes out once and that's it. All right. So in this way, ये मेरे पास जो terms हैं यहाँ पे इस shape में है, these terms. Can I take the derivative out and then it applies to the sum as well? So can I take the whole time derivative outside and write like this: M1, R1, M2, R2 plus MR, RR. Is there a problem with it? See, just the operator is outside, it linearly operates, it multiplies with all three terms. And then once you take the derivative, you get exactly these things. Is it transparent to everyone?
Sir, can you please explain again why you multiplied and divided by m?
Oh, that would become clear in a minute, okay? So this is one for now, so don't worry about that. But first make sure that you understand this step. Just taking the dt squared dt outside and writing it like this. Okay, and now I can also take this constant inside the derivative. It wouldn't make any difference to the derivative. And I'll write it like this. M, just instead of writing a new thing, let's write M here. Inside the derivative. Okay. Now on my left-hand side, I have this quantity. On my right-hand side, I have an expression that looks like this. Okay. Just carefully look at this equation. And first of all, can you guess what does it look like? What does it look like?
सर ये उसकी इक्वेशन जैसी ना F equals ma वाली इक्वेशन जैसी.
Exactly. This looks like Newton's law. And if this looks like Newton's law, what should be this object? What would be the dimensions of this object?
This is the displacement.
Position, some position vector, right? R.
Right.
Right. And this, of course, is, if you then take, then this would be the acceleration term, right? And multiplied by mass. So I can write this equation like this. And this would definitely have the dimensions of R. You can verify, you multiply, divide R with each term. So this would become M over M, just a ratio, dimensionless ratio, a dimensionless ratio. And then it's just adding three vectors multiplied by some constants. Then it would have the same dimensions as R1, R2, and R3, position vector. D squared over dt R capital. Okay, where now I define where it means that R is this quantity here, M1 R1 plus M2 R2 plus MR RR, okay, over M. All right. Now this is Newton's law for a system of equation, for a system of particles. So this is Newton's law for three particles in this case, but we can generalize it to n particles. We can generalize it to infinite particles. And what is this R? This R is, remember we talked about a special point on the object. Okay? A special point on the object which executes a very nice parabolic motion like a point particle would do in a projectile scenario. Okay? And this R is the position vector of that special point. Right? And its mathematical definition is M1 R1 plus M2 R2 plus MRR divided by the total mass. All right. So in such a system which has more than one particle, every point moves differently. Okay? But this point, this special point moves in a special way. For example, if you're throwing a how is it called? How is it called? If you throw an object on a flat surface which has finite dimensions, all right? And let's say if I roll a chalk here, or if I roll a chalk on the table, and it would be going like this. The chalk on the table, on the horizontal table, would be going like this. This is the type of trajectory every point on the chalk makes, okay? Let's say I throw it in a straight line. So the chalk would trace something like this. But the special point always stays on the straight line. And that is the position vector of that. And this equation, the sum of all external forces equal to mass times the acceleration of that special point, or the time derivative of the position vector of that special point, gives us the motion of this special point. Okay? But its position vector we can find using this formula that we have just derived, okay? Using Newton's second law, no assumptions, no new fundamental laws, okay? Just using the Newton's second and third law together. Any questions so far?
आप एक दफे दोबारा बता सकते हैं जो कैपिटल आर है क्या सिग्निफाई करता है? आपने कहा था एक स्पेसिफिक पॉइंट के बारे में है.
मैं बताता हूँ आपको अभी. We are still discussing it, but what I'm saying is that whenever you see an object that has a finite size, anything that you see at your home that rolls around, a toy or anything that has a finite size, you know that if you look at particularly the extreme points, they're doing a very complicated motion, like the chalk. You see, the edges, the top edge, for example, goes from here to here, then here, then here, and here. Okay, but there was one point on this chalk, and it happens to be in the middle, and which is not a coincidence, that did this straight line motion. Okay. It is coordinate of that special point for now.
Same.
Okay. You can think of this in another way, that whenever you have an object, a finite object, all other points accelerate differently depending on the forces that are acting on them, okay? And the initial conditions and things like that. But that special point sees just the external forces. It ignores the internal forces. Okay? That special point only sees the external force and responds to it with as if it had all the mass associated with it. This special point acts like a point of total mass, okay, M, experiencing all the total external force. So in a way, if we had a point particle, and if we have this special point on a finite sized object, both of them have very similar motion, except for this, that the position vector of this special point is related to its constituent particles of the system through this relationship. Okay. And then its acceleration would be scaled according to the total external force and the total mass of the object. Or in other words, this is what the center of mass of an object is. Okay. This is where mass appears to be, all the mass appears to be concentrated of an object. Okay, this was a just two masses attached to each other through a rigid rod. But now let's generalize this concept. Okay. Let's take it to an object which has n particles, an object like this, which has 1, 2, 3, n particles, okay? All associated to, all tied to each other through rigid rods, okay? N particles. So now let's write all the forces acting on each of the particle. M1, so the force is acting on M1. So one of the force is, let's say that we throw it like we throw a projectile, this object. Okay, so it has one external force, and we are talking about particle 1 with mass M1. One external force. Now, the particle 1 would be experiencing a force that particle 2 is exerting on it. It would also be experiencing a force that particle 3 is exerting on it. Okay. And so on. So it would be experiencing a force that nth particle is exerting on it. Okay. This is the external force, the first term. And all other forces are internal. Okay. Now the particle cannot exert a force on itself. That is why the F11 term is not here. That would be self-interaction. Okay. F11 is not here. And this would be equal to M1 d squared R1 over dt squared. Now let's do this for a second particle. External force plus F21, the force that particle 1 is exerting on particle 2. F23 F2n M1 d squared over dt squared. And this would be M2. Okay. And now you see here again, F22 is missing in this because the particle 2 cannot exert any force on itself. Similarly, we can take it to a general mith particle, Mi. Okay. What would be the situation of forces for this particle? Fi E, the ith particle that is experiencing external force, plus Fi one plus Fi2, And at some point down the road, there would be a situation where we would have I is equal to I, okay? And that term would be excluded. We'll make that and the ith particle experiencing the force that is exerted by nth particle on it. And then this would become mi d squared ri over dt squared. All right.
सर अब इसको हम रिजिड कंसिडर करेंगे या नहीं कर सकते?
अभी उसके बारे में बात करते हैं, ठीक है? So can I, there is a short way of writing this, this equation, and that is that so I'm taking this force on the ith particle, okay? All the forces and trying to write it in the short form. The ith particle experiencing external force plus sum over I from 1 to n, okay? All these terms 1 to n. F sorry. So now I'll have to introduce a new index for the particle that is exerting the force 1, 2, and there would be a particle. There would be a term here where the jth particle exerting the force on ith particle. If I could just write it here. So at some point there would be a force term where particle j is exerting force F on particle I. Okay, so we sum along all the particles. So we say j is equal to 1, goes all the way up to n, and this index remains the same because it's ith atom. Okay, sorry, ith particle, could be atom as well. It's the ith particle in the system. And then all the forces that particles exert on ith particle. What is wrong with this expression?
Sir, we need to subtract the force where j is equals to I.
Yes, exactly. Excellent. So these are not n terms. These are n minus 1 terms because we have to exclude the self-interaction term. All right. And to exclude that, you could write it like this. I is equal to j, or as an even better way of writing is I not equals to j in the sum. That's just a fancy way of saying that one term where I is equal to j does not belong to this sum. Exclude that when you expand this sum. Okay. And on the right hand side,
सर जे एग्जैक्टली किस चीज को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहा है?
all the particles in the system.
जी ठीक, थैंक यू सर.
So m I d squared r I over dt squared. Okay. This still is the equation for one particle, not all the particles. Okay. Ith particle experiencing external force. This term, then the ith particle experiencing the force due to the rest of the particles in the system, okay? All the systems. So these terms, if you expand, you will get exactly this. But we want to make it more simpler. Now we want to add, this is the ith particle. And how many particles do I have? N. So I want to add these n equations together. Okay. First equation, second equation, ith equation, then there would be an nth equation. I want to add all these equations together. So I would have to introduce another sum. I would have to sum over I. So I is initially an object here, a particle here. Okay, it is experiencing one external force, and then it is experiencing a force from particle 1, particle 2, particle 3, particle 4. Okay, so that equation is this: one external force and all the forces from the other particles. Now we want to take particle 2 and take into account the external force that it is experiencing and the forces that it is experiencing from the rest of the particles. So I need to introduce another sum here. I need to sum over I. And that would be the sum of all the external forces, I1 to N, F, I, this. And then sum of all these terms, I1 to N, J1 to N, with the condition that J is not equal to I. Okay. Fij is equal to sum of all the acceleration terms from I1 to N d squared R I over dt squared. All right, just a shorthand form. We are dealing with N particles. So this is the shorthand form. Now, now if you look at this equation, if you expand it a few terms, you will get exactly this. The first term would be starting from F1, F13, F12, F13 to F1N. Okay. The second term would be F21, F23, F2N. The third term would be Fi1, I2, I3. Okay. And if the object is rigid, then all these pairs. So first of all, you need to recognize that the forces are coming in pair. We have 1, 2. We have 2, 1. We have 1, 3. And we have, because I didn't write the third equation, in the third, for the third particle, there would be 3, 1. Okay. And in a similar way, there would be a, so you, all these forces, you can also see from the picture, are coming in pairs. Okay. And they are equal and opposite because the object is rigid. F21 is equal to minus F12. So their sum would be actually 0. So this term would be 0. All the effort for
Sir?
nothing. Yes.
ये जो आपने अभी ये लास्ट वाली इक्वेशन निकाली है ना, जिसमें आपने ये सम ऑफ एन और आई और ये सब यूज किया हुआ है, ये आप प्लीज दोबारा समझा सकते हैं, क्योंकि मुझे समझ नहीं आ रही सही से.
ठीक है, शायद अगर मैं कोई ज्यादा सिंपल एक सम की एक्सपेंशन लिखूं तो शायद समझ आ जाए. लेट मी सी.
आई थिंक ये कॉन्सेप्ट काफी मुश्किल है, तो इस वजह से शायद मुश्किल हो रही होगी.
इट्स ऑल राइट. ये देखें ना, ये चीज है कि आपके पास एक है नंबर, या इसको एक्सपैंड कर लें तो फिर शायद ज्यादा बेहतर समझ आ जाए. ठीक है, लेट मी गो बैक.
मैंने आपसे पूछा कि आप इस इक्वेशन तक पहुंचे कैसे, वो समझा दें. उससे पहले वाला कॉन्सेप्ट मुझे समझ आ गया.
देखिए ना, ये पार्टिकल 1 के लिए इक्वेशन है. ठीक है, अब इस इक्वेशन को शॉर्ट कैसे लिख सकते हैं? ये तो एक ही टर्म है, इसकी तो कोई और रिपीटिशन नहीं है, लेकिन ये बाकी वाली टर्म्स जो है ना, ठीक है, इनमें ये वाला इंडेक्स कॉमन है, फर्स्ट इंडेक्स. इसका कॉमन होने का ये मतलब है कि दिस इज द फोर्स बीइंग एक्सपीरियंस्ड बाय द फर्स्ट पार्टिकल, बाय जो इस पे सेकंड पार्टिकल एक्सर्ट कर रहा है, उसी पार्टिकल पे जो थर्ड पार्टिकल फोर्स एक्सर्ट कर रहा है, उसी पार्टिकल पे जो या उसके पार्टिकल पे जो nth पार्टिकल एक्सर्ट कर रहा है. तो इसको मैं शॉर्ट फॉर्म में यहाँ लिख दिया है ये वाली चीज, ये उसका मतलब है।
सही।
ठीक है ना। अब इसको आप बेशक यहाँ पे 1 कर लें, ये पार्टिकल 1 है।
सही।
ठीक है, और जे के ऊपर सम लिख दिया है। ये सारी फोर्सेस यहां से यहां तक यहाँ आ गई हैं। ठीक है ना। जब आप
सही।
जे पर सम एक्सपैंड करेंगे, सिर्फ उसमें एक गलती होगी कि उसमें 1 टर्म भी आ जाएगी, जो कि यहाँ नहीं है, क्योंकि सेल्फ इंटरेक्शन है ना 1 टर्म। तो फोर्स एक्सर्टिंग ऑन पार्टिकल 1 बाई पार्टिकल 1 वो तो 0 है, तो इस सम में आ जाएगी। उसको एक्सक्लूड करने के लिए ये लिख दिया है, एक फैंसी वे है, आई नॉट इक्वल टू जे, कि वो टर्म इस सम में एक्सक्लूड इंक्लूडेड नहीं है व्हेन यू एक्सपैंड दिस सम। ठीक है।
सही।
अब ये पार्टिकल 1 के लिए मैं इसको भी जनरलाइज करना चाह रहा हूँ। मैं चाह रहा हूँ कि किसी ith पार्टिकल के लिए, इनमें से किसी एक के लिए, नॉट स्पेसिफिकली पार्टिकल 1, तो मैंने इस इंडेक्स को आई कर दिया है। ठीक है ना। ये अब इसके लिए भी हो सकती है, इसके लिए अब आई की वैल्यू चेंज करें तो आप इनमें से कोई एक इक्वेशन आपको मिल जाएगी। वट एवर वैल्यू ऑफ आई यू प्लग इन हियर 1, तो ये पार्टिकल 1 के लिए इक्वेशन बन जाएगी। यू प्लग इन द वैल्यू ऑफ 2 इन हियर, यू गेट दिस इक्वेशन, यू प्लग इन 3, यू गेट दिस इक्वेशन। ठीक है ना। अब मैंने इन इक्वेशंस को आपस में भी ऐड करना है। ठीक है ना। तो आई हैव टू ऐड अनदर सम। तो अब जब मैं इन इक्वेशंस को आपस में ऐड करूंगा, तो ये पार्टिकल 1 की है, पार्टिकल 2 की है, अब मैं इस पे सम रन करूंगा, आई पे, आई रिप्रेजेंट कर ना फर्स्ट इंडेक्स को, तो आई हैव टू ऐड अनदर सम। तो अब ये देखें ना कितनी फोर्सेस लग रही हैं एक्सटर्नल, जो टोटल एक्सटर्नल फोर्सेस सब पार्टिकल्स पे लग रही हैं, 1 2 n लग रही हैं।
जी।
ठीक है ना। तो ये पहली टर्म वहां से आ गई, ऑल द एक्सटर्नल फोर्सेस। ठीक है ना। तो आपको ये देखें, इसको एक्सपैंड करें तो क्या आएगा, 1e 2e 3e 4e until you get to ne। ये सम समझ आ गया।
जी।
अब ये है सारी फोर्सेस जो पार्टिकल आई पे लग रही हैं, ये पार्टिकल 1 पे लग रही हैं, 2 पे लग रही हैं, 3 पे। अब इनको मैंने सम करना है। ठीक है। तो यहाँ पे एक एडिशनल सम है दैट रन्स फ्रॉम I1 to n। ठीक है।
सही।
ठीक है। तो देन ये पार्टिकल 1 पे लग रही है फोर्स व्हेन I is 1, when I is 2, so this whole thing is this thing, when I is 3, then this whole thing is this thing, and so on and so forth। सिर्फ
सही।
सम किया बिकॉज अब हमारे पास 2 इंडेक्स हैं। ठीक है। और ये दैट साइड इज जस्ट सिंपल, you have all these terms adding up and being written in a sum, right? And then I said that these are all internal forces, and for a rigid object they come in pairs. Okay? And those pairs for a rigid object are equal and opposite in direction, so they cancel out. Okay, so moving on, now we are with this situation here. I1 to n IE equals I1 to n mi d square r over dt squared, and that's it. So this is just an external force. Sum of all external forces is an external force. So let's call it Fe. Okay. And on this side, you see again, I can define a total mass, which is nothing but this I1 to n, sorry, I1 to n is equal to mi, or in other words, it is equal to m1 plus m2 mn. Right? Again, multiply and divide and take the derivative out. And if I do that, then I can write sum 1 to n mi ri over m. this term here. Okay. Now again, we have a very similar equation like we had before, but that was for 2 particles. This is for n particles. Okay. And we have now, so this quantity here, what is this quantity here?
Sir, we won't write mi inside the summation, won't we?
Why? What?
We've already taken it out, haven't we? Sir, mi
No, we didn't want to take it out.
inside the summation.
Ji?
Okay.
No,
From
we are
inside the
doing
summation, sir.
we are doing the opposite. We want to take the constant inside the derivative, not outside.
Okay.
That is what we said before. Okay. And you see that constant inside the derivative or outside does not make difference. Doesn't make a difference. I'm taking 2 constant inside, 1 over m and mi. Okay. And now this gives me a general definition for the center of mass, a more general definition. Okay. And now R is what? For an n particle system, R is simply mi Ri over capital M. It's the same thing that we had before. It is, if you want to expand this sum, it looks like M1, R1, M2, R2, Mn, Rn divided by the mass. And you see, it's very interesting. This if you think of this thing geometrically, this is the weighted sum of the position vectors. Okay. So you have different particles of your system here, 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 and each one has a position vector with respect to a coordinate system. R1, R2, okay, R3, okay. And the center of mass is just the weighted sum of the, you say this particle has mass M1, you multiply it with this, you give it a weight. What would be the contribution of this vector in the position vector? And that depends on how heavy the object is, how heavy that point is. You multiply M with R1, so you create the weight of this vector, then you create the weight of second vector, third vector, nth vector, and you add them all together and divide them by total mass. And that gives you the center of the mass. It's a very geometric definition. But wherever that is, it gives you this capital R, okay, in the same coordinate system. That this is the center of mass. This is the special point which disregards the internal forces and responds to assuming all the mass as if it belongs to itself. Okay, as the name suggests, it's the center of the mass. Okay, as if all the mass belongs to this point, and then it disregards all the internal forces and only responds to the total external force. And if you solve this equation, you get how R evolves, how this special point moves. You will get R of t, you will get V of t. So this is Newton's second law for a system of particles. But there is one thing that we are not dealing with. We are ignoring all the non-special points, the motion of all the non-special points. This equation would not tell us what is happening to the rest of the things. It is just telling us the motion of the special point. And sometimes that is what we are interested in. Okay. For example, if you see that you're throwing a football, okay, all you're interested in is where it would approximately land. Okay. Or if you're throwing a chalk, you're not really interested in what would be its orientation when it lands. Okay. All you're interested in its position where it would land. Okay. So ignoring the motion of all these objects for now, the cost is just that we are losing the information about the orientation of the object. Okay. How would it be oriented at a particular point? At a particular point in time, but its center of mass motion we can trace using this equation. We can find out its center of mass, solve this equation, and we find the trajectory of the center of the mass of the object. Taking into account the non-special points, the motion of the non-special points that we would deal with in the next chapter, next week or week after that.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
Sir, summation I is equals to 1 to n. Mi
Yes.
is also equal to capital M. So if we just take that outside of the sum and write it as capital M, d
Oh, you
square.
can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that because having this index means that M1 is different, M2 is different. You can't take it common.
No,
Weighted
sir, I'm
sum.
saying that the summation of Mi is equals to capital M. So if we take it outside and write it as capital M.
In this expression, that's what you're saying.
Yes.
You can't do that. And let me show you why. Even here. Can you take M common here? In this equation?
Okay. No, we can't. Okay.
That is what it means.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Every particle has a different mass. Yes, if you have n particles and each particle is a hydrogen atom, okay, or a water molecule, in such cases, then it becomes incredibly simple. You can take the mass outside. But those are special cases. If you're looking at solid iron, for example, now every iron atom has the same mass as the other. Okay? So you can take, then M1 would be equal to M2, M3, you can take M out, but that is the condition. And you can have a subgroup of particles having same mass. Let's say you're trying to calculate the center of mass of a cube of ice, a very small cube of ice. Okay? Then you are going down to atomic scale. Now you have two groups of atoms. You have hydrogens and oxygens. You can split this sum into two subgroups, sum of the coordinates and the masses of oxygen and sum of the coordinates and masses of the hydrogen. And then in two special cases, separate them together and write just take the mass of hydrogen out and take the mass of oxygen out. But then we would still be left with an equation that looks like this. Mass of hydrogen plus all the coordinates of hydrogen, R1, R2, Rn, okay? An equation like this, plus mass of oxygen and all the coordinates of oxygen, okay? R1 prime, R2 prime, Rn prime, and divided by n, then divided by the total mass. Okay? You can do that. But that's only very special cases.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right. All right, now let's say, because the definition for the definition for the center of mass is not more general enough. So in this case, for example, why is this not general? Because it assumes discrete particles, like as an assembly of atoms, I said, okay? And discrete and finite number of particles. But let's say you do not have a discrete system. Let's say you have a mass, a continuous mass, like a rod. Okay, so if you have a rod like this and you want to find out its center of mass, how do you do it? Okay. It's no more discrete. And let's say you are not aware of the atomic detail, or it's too big for you to calculate from adding the masses of the atoms. Okay. How you do it is you assume that in every length delta x, there is a mass delta m. Okay. And then you again invoke the sum that we have been writing. So you say the center of mass is, so you make infinite or whatever n number of divisions on the rod, and you take I1 to n, all right, and delta mi, okay, xi. At every position of x, you have a certain mass dm. At this, it's a different, it has a different position, has a different position. I'm writing this in one dimension to make it simple. So let me say this, when we write this equation, 1 over m I1 to n 1 to n m1 r1 or MIRI, you can always deal with this equation in components, and it is equally valid. So you can, instead of directly doing this, you can just calculate the capital X, the X coordinate, and it would be like this. I1 to n MIXI. In this way, you would calculate the X coordinate, the Y coordinate, and the Z coordinate, and eventually you would have calculated R. Okay. So I'm doing this in one dimension to make it easier. And let's say the coordinate system is such that this is X and this is Y. All right. Now, this would be the center of mass, the X coordinate of the center of mass. So if you let the n to infinity, okay, and the delta mass to be very, very small, approximately 0, then we know that this sum becomes an integral. Okay, x, and there should be a 1 over m outside, sorry, here. So this becomes 1 over m integral x dm x. And if you want to write it in terms of r, that is what it would mean. 1 over m integral r dm. Okay, that's the most general definition of the center of mass. You must integrate. Now let's find out the center of mass of this rod. Let's say that it is sitting here on the coordinate system, or this is the origin here. And the rod is, its length is L, from 0 to L. All right. But before we do the integration, we must find out what dm is in terms of dx. Okay. So let's say that this rod is of uniform width and thickness, so that every part of the rod, every little length of the rod has the same mass. So it has a linear mass density of ml, where m is the total mass of the rod divided by the length. That would be linear mass density. Okay? And this is uniform. This does not depend on whichever position of the rod, each equal division on the rod has an equal mass. That is what it means. Now, if I multiply this density with a small length, delta x, that would be equal to dm. Okay. So if you plug that value of dm in here, 1 over m in this one, let's do the one dimensional x here. So we have x m over L dx, and the limit of integration would be from 0 to L. All right. And then this m and L are just constants. You take them outside and you integrate the rest of the expression. So you would get m over ml 0 to L x dx. So what would be this integral? 0 to L of x dx?
सर
L
ये
squared?
m और m का कैंसिल हो जाएगा आपस में?
जी जी. L squared by 2 and L cancels the square. So what is the answer? L by 2. At half its length would be the center of mass. All right. Does it make sense? At half its length, using this general definition for a non-discrete object. But I want to point out another very important aspect is that if you look at this rod, I could have calculated its center of mass, or without calculating, estimated its center of mass by symmetry, okay? And the symmetry is that if you choose the center of mass, so if you place this rod, that half of the rod is on this side of the origin and half of the rod is on that side of the origin. Okay, and then if you expand this sum, then if you imagine this sum, so if you place the rod at this position from minus L by 2 along x-axis to plus L by 2, okay, this is x-axis. And from here, without doing the integration, let's say that you have a piece, a strip on the rod like this at position x naught. Okay, so what would be its contribution to this sum x? Okay, it would be x naught delta m at that location. Okay, delta m x naught. But you'd see that at exactly at x naught minus x naught, there would be the same amount of mass with the negative sign, dm x naught. So every piece of mass on this side of the axis has an equal counterpart on this side of the axis. So if you place the origin exactly in the middle, and by symmetry, you can argue that the x would be 0. The center of mass would be in this coordinate 0. Okay? And that tells you that whenever you have a uniform rod, its center of mass it's in the middle by symmetry. Okay? It's very useful when you're calculating the center of mass of different objects. Try to think of what symmetries you can take advantage of. All right. And sometimes you don't really need to do a calculation. For example, if you have a shell, a spherical shell, what would be the center of mass? The center of the sphere.
Center of the circle hoga, sir.
I'm saying it's a shell.
It's a sphere ho jayega.
The center of the sphere. If it is a circular disc, then it would be the center of the
disc ka center ho jayega.
Yes. So you would have a lot of examples to practice in both in your notes and in the recitations, and then in the tutorials and assignments. So practice it. Okay. Get yourself used to. You may not always need the integration. Another interesting example to try is that take this rod and imagine that it has a non-uniform linear density. Let's say that the rod is thin on one side and thick on the other side. That its mass density is higher on this end and lower on this end. Now try to solve this by yourself. Thank you very much. I'll end it here, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer now.